began studying piano at the age of 4. And as a young child, I would hear music on the car radio while my mother was taking me to school. And I would start to sing the next note that I was sure was about to play. And I asked my mother, do all people hear music like this, predicting what the next note will be before they've heard it? She assured me that I heard music in a unique way. Little did I know that decades later, AI would be trying to predict that next note or the next series of chords to help a human composer as a virtual collaborator in writing music. It's similar. The reason why music can do this is because music is math. And when I mean by that is that music is highly quantifiable and measurable in time, pitch, duration, volume, frequency, everything, and it's highly systematized. AI extrapolates patterns and other earlier iterations of music to determine what might be the next logical series of pitches, chords, or lyrics. And in so doing, it offers a human composer the possibility of that next note, chord, or at least a series of lyrics, in the same way that your smartphone proposes possible words for you to use while you're typing a text. Today, I work at the intersection of music, law, and technology. I'm often asked to give an opinion and testify in court as to whether or not one song copied another in the protection of intellectual property and music creativity in our legal system. And yet, after a lifetime of study, I am still trying to find out the answer to how a musical work, full-blown as it is, came out of nothing. Zero. How did a show like Hamilton come to be? And how did Beethoven come up with his Fifth Symphony when he was deaf and lived in total isolation? I wonder how Beethoven would have been even a greater composer had he had AI and other technology to help him hear his music and experience the vibrations. And instead of waiting for an orchestra to learn his great works slowly and deliberately over time, he could have had a virtual orchestration of it in his studio and immediately hear his own music. Here's an example. I still feel that that's a masterpiece of 4 notes in originality. Still, today, I feel that music is being democratized by AI because it's not all about just the geniuses. Average people can now write music, access it, and develop some of their own creativity through the use of AI to assist them and help them with skills they may not otherwise have. How is this possible and why is it important? Because of all forms of communication, I truly believe that music is the most universal of all languages. Regardless of whether or not one hears the words and understands them in a concert, I see people in concerts swaying to music, crying tears, dancing with joy because of the spirit of the tones and the melodies and some of the other elements of a concert when it's sung in a foreign language that they don't understand. This is because music goes straight past intellectualization into and deeply into our hearts, in my opinion. Music is also a great healer, and it always has been. But today, with the use of AI, music has become something of a superpower as a healer. By this I mean that music has reached the depths of mentally ill, cognitively impaired, and at times brain damaged patients in a way that only medication and only therapy alone have not. This has been proven scientifically. And recently, the National Institutes of Health have partnered with the great university MIT and the Media Lab there to discover that there are gamma frequencies when used in audio form that improve or even turn back the advancement of Alzheimer's. In addition, in a Boston area hospital, patients who are severely paralyzed due to cerebral palsy are able to write their own music just by wearing a headset and by looking at a screen. I've seen the expression of pure joy on their faces when, imprisoned in their own bodies, they hear the music that they themselves created. This is very, very hopeful. Music also reaches beyond, with AI, reaches beyond healing and helps average people with limited or no musical education to create music and participate in the creative and communication process. It allows people to overcome barriers also, but in terms of it helping people to create music on their own with very little education, we have heard now that there is a program called a HyperScore that young children who don't have a musical education and maybe don't even yet read can draw with colors and figures on a screen, and AI can interpret that into musical sounds and encourage them that their creativity means something and is being expressed and some of their deeper feelings. As well, we are now learning that AI is overcoming certain barriers that musicians have always had in many ways. By that I mean that composers were always taught, limit your song to the lowest and highest note that the singer, the soprano, can sing, or only write music that the bass can play, nothing too high, nothing lower than the bass, etc. You're limited by the instrument or the vocal capacity or the talents or the skills of the musician and the instrument. But for many years, in fact, for over a century, composers have wanted to work around those obstacles, and they've done it in non-technological ways. For example, there's an entire body of piano music written only for the left hand, for concert pianists who had their right hand amputated or disabled, sometimes in a war. But with AI, we've even overcome the barriers of physical instruments or vocal techniques by enhancing it through the use of AI and enlarging our experience of sound and experience in performing. AI has also enabled us, as music has over the century, to travel over distance, time, and even death. By that I mean that today we know of recordings that are being created when the composer or band is no longer either performing or perhaps the members are no longer alive. There are many pieces of music, both in the classical repertoire and the popular repertoire, that were never finished because of the death of a composer who left his opera partly written, or a song wasn't completed, or it was lost somewhere in a studio or in a vault before which it could be completed. The writer passed away or the band disbanded. Recently, we've heard of a Beatles song that has been created from the singing of John Lennon that needed to be cleaned up in a way that it could be better heard, and eventually was recently heard in a recent film about the Beatles and about some of their experiences, whereas this had been lost over time because it was impossible to clean up the audio until AI could learn from it enough to improve it. Also, many films are using music or vocal lines from artists who are no longer with us by learning from, in this case, Edith Piaf, the great French singer and actress. Earlier films and recordings trained AI, and recently there was a recent biopic in which she was actually shown as if she were the one speaking and singing when she actually wasn't. Still, with all of these expansions of creativity and the abundance of content, there are risks involved that need to be considered. For example, not every artist wants his or her likeness or voice impersonated. There are estates involved in legal disputes because an artist's voice was used without permission, and the music industry is very, very strong in its enforcement. And you may have heard about certain takedowns recently due to deep fakes of some of perhaps your favorite artists. Also, not everybody wants to be implied as being the composer of something just because the computer and machine learning could learn from it enough to write what might have been the next Taylor Swift song, but she didn't write it. So there are legal and ethical risks in doing everything that possibly could be done by technology. Where are the boundaries between inspiration and copying? This is a question I'm actually asked to answer in the court of law when copyright infringement and music plagiarism has been suspected or accused. I was asked to be an expert witness by the Marvin Gaye estate in representing his song, Got to Give It Up, against Pharrell Williams' song, Blurred Lines, in the recent past. And in such, I was asked to dissect the music for the jury and help them understand if I saw them as one is copying the other, and if it met the legal standard called substantial similarity, which means that it has been copied in a legal sense and consequences would take place. I was able to dissect the music and find that, in fact, the music had been reverse engineered in a way that, in fact, I felt that there was a strong enough similarity of a large number of unique qualities from Marvin Gaye's song found in Blurred Lines to the level that I did believe that it was substantially similar. I was able to show the jury one particular area that was very dramatically similar, in that the two works had a very similar midsection. One was called a parlando in Marvin Gaye's song, and the other was a rap in the other song. But the way they began and ended were identical in something called word painting, where the identical words, up, down, round, were set to the identical melodies to illustrate those words symbolically as a high note for up, a low note for down, and the exact same notes, etc. The jury awarded a resounding victory for the Marvin Gaye estate, and the music industry has been reeling about it ever since. Still, that aside, I truly believe that the miracle of humanity is the desire to create and invent something that was never there before. We are all born with an imagination, curiosity, and a voice, the original instrument. I believe that we have a deep need to be heard on some level, all of us. With AI, we have expanded the ability to communicate and to collaborate as never before. In the words of the great Victor Hugo, music expresses that which cannot be said and on which it is impossible to be silent. Thank you.